Hi, my name is Lori Grow. I'm co-owner at Shoreside Therapies. Today we have Lindsey Kingsley again with us. Today we're going to talk about the difference between social anxiety and general anxiety. And I'm really excited about this. So thank you, Lindsey.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah. So today we're going to talk about social anxiety. I'm very passionate about anxiety and social anxiety. So I thought we could just learn more about it today, try to understand it a little bit better.
That sounds
So
good.
many times, a little bit just the differences. There's a couple nuances between general anxiety and social anxiety. So with general anxiety, it's more than usually one situation. It's like multiple life areas. So that could be things such as like worrying about just like job stress, relationships, parenting, children, just different aspects of your life. It's kind of almost like spilled water. It's just kind of everywhere. With social anxiety, it's more primarily around the relationships or social situations, such as like regarding like being scrutinized or judged, perceptions of others, or negative assumptions and feedback. So there's just a little bit of differences in how we treat. So yeah.
Okay, so if you have social anxiety, it's going to be really tied though with social interactions, but the relationships could be part of it as well. And if
Yeah.
someone has general anxiety, it might spill over to a whole lot of different areas. Somebody might have social anxiety as well as general anxiety. I'm guessing too, right?
Absolutely. You can have both.
All right. So, what
Yeah.
is social anxiety?
Yeah. So different symptoms could be usually fear of rejection about one or more social situations where an individual might fear, like we said, potential rejection, judgment, showing any anxiety symptoms, things like stuttering, stammering, maybe forgetting your words, or just kind of like a loss at words or getting flustered. And usually that leads to general avoidance of situations that cause fear. So in kiddos and children, it might look like freezing, even tantrums, kind of shrinking up in themselves, or not speaking in social situations like school, or becoming mute even. So they might just not say anything. And with adults, it might look like more shyness, just keeping to yourself, not speaking up when you need something, or just kind of just like a paralyzing sense of fear about approaching others. Might be like keeping a distance or like declining invitations to like meet up with people. Yeah.
So there is like that the physical symptoms. There's then maybe that avoidance that goes with it of not actually going towards some of those social interactions.
Mhm.
And then you might notice some things in yourself, or if we're looking at a child, you might notice that in the kid as well, of maybe being very, very quiet, and that's not what they're normally like at
Yeah.
home, that sort of thing.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
great. All right, let's move on to what's the difference between social anxiety and general anxiety. And we kind of answered that one already. So I wonder if
Yeah.
there's anything else to add in that,
No, no,
or yeah.
no, we did
No.
that one. So we'll do the
Okay.
coping. Yeah,
Okay,
next.
that sounds good.
There we
All
go.
right. Yeah.
So how people cope. So
Yes.
generally, the ways that we cope can be kind of ineffective, but that's how that starts. So it can look like just avoiding those situations, could be withdrawing from others. So maybe just kind of like pulling back, could be isolating to certain areas. So say like someone's in like a group of people, they may just be hanging out in one area of a group or like a large group. Lots of overthinking and worrying about what we're going to say, what we're going to, do, things like that. So we call that like mentally preparing in your head, maybe what you might say, maybe like going over a script of this is what I'm going to say, and then going over that again. And it's repetitive. We might use humor to break, like the ice within situations. And just generally, like we might fear that, our body language, things like that, and mannerisms might be awkward or weird, just kind of the way that you're standing and that. So sometimes the problem is, though, is when we're thinking about like, oh, I don't want to come off weird. And then like, I might be standing somewhere and doing something that might actually be awkward and be perceived as, awkward or anxious. So then that causes more anxiety. Yeah.
That makes sense. That makes sense. So those ways that people cope, those seem like they could be positive things for sure.
Yeah.
And like a learning, like for instance, if somebody came in, they were saying, I have social anxiety, and I notice it more so when I'm with like a supervisor or something like that. They might repeat some of the things prior to actually engaging with their supervisor something like that. Yep.
Yeah, so they're not inherently bad, just sometimes they
Yeah.
come into issues when it's like a lot of avoidance or stammering and things like that. So we really work through and pull apart like which ones are helpful and which ones aren't.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
All right. So, what does treatment look like for social anxiety?
Yeah, so a couple different ones. So a form of cognitive behavioral therapy we call is exposure response prevention, and we use this a lot for social anxiety. So what that is basically like experiential learning that I can be in this situation and sometimes my feared outcome doesn't happen. I don't get criticized or people don't judge me, but we approach anyways. So the problem with the anxiety cycle is we tend to avoid, and then we never learn that like that situation wasn't dangerous. So the more that we avoid, our mind actually kind of labels that as this is a fearful situation. We need to avoid that situation, and then it creates this cycle. So exposure response prevention is basically just identifying the fear and then working to approach the feared situation and reducing our response, which might be avoiding. So I always say if we're avoiding, we're working on approaching and kind of leaning into it slowly. Other cognitive behavioral therapy techniques is like challenging the fear thoughts. So if I fear that nobody likes me, we might, in what ways does no one like you? So we might challenge that, like, well, I do have some friends, or, people generally like me, things like that. So we just work to challenge those negative, unhelpful beliefs and identify those. And then depending on if it's more like general anxiety, we might do like some relaxation and mindfulness training to really work to decrease that distress within the situation.
It sounds good. So it sounds like the first part is really putting yourself into some situations that might cause the social anxiety. So kind of leaning in, and then you're there to help process that and what makes sense, and kind of being within their limits of some anxiety, but not too much. Right. And then it sounds like some mindfulness techniques also help. And then challenging some of the thoughts. So are those beliefs actually true? Do people actually not like me? And like you said, I have some friends. So there's some people out there that do. And that can make a huge difference in just feeling confident in the situation.
Yeah.
All right. Myths about social anxiety.
Yeah. So busting some of these. Yeah. So sometimes people believe that social anxiety is just being nervous, like being nervous around being keyed up, things like that. But it's a lot more. The symptoms of social anxiety can vary like from situation to situation, but it can be like irritability, and it can be, like we said, avoidance. It could be shaking, freezing. Like people kind of sometimes just go in that fight or flight response when they're in social situations. So it's a lot more. I think that kind of minimizes like the whole spectrum of like everything that can occur. Second one is that social anxiety is a problem that you can live with, that like you can just like, go about your day, things like that. But it can be really, really intense for some people. So debilitating to the sense of they avoid work, relationships, approaching others, kids that go like completely mute in schools and then, have troubles speaking and communicating with others and getting their needs met. So it can be as extreme as, I don't ask someone where the bathroom is, so then I just hold it. And so it could be really, really extreme in cases. So really, not minimizing, I guess, any of those symptoms that might be occurring and getting the help that you need, because there is help out there. So I want to remind people, like, you don't have to live like that if it's not the way that you want to live.
Right.
And then the other one is social anxiety is the same as shyness. And so people who are shy always experience kind of a little bit of social anxiety, but those who have social anxiety don't always appear shy. So someone might actually appear confident or, like come off as, they know what they're talking about, things like that, but they could still experience social anxiety inside. So it's really hard to tell sometimes. So some people, just assume that it just means that you're shy, right? And so then the more confident you get, that'll go away, and not always, right? So sometimes, we can go about our life, but still have that struggle. And then the last one, the fourth one, is that social anxiety isn't common, and it actually is. So around the World Health Organization says around 4 to 12% of people in the US have social anxiety. So it's a pretty good amount of people, that might struggle with different situations in their work or school.
And thanks for sharing that number, that information too, because I know a lot of people feel very alone with social anxiety and think I'm the only one experiencing this, and is something really wrong with me? And the reality is, just like you said, it's a cycle, and that avoidance cycle makes it worse and bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
Yeah. All right. So last one, what are the common types of social anxiety?
Yeah, so primarily the most common is public speaking. We all can think that, right? You got to get up in front of a crowd, you have to give a speech, you have to give a presentation at work, maybe a kiddo has to give, some type of, activity or assignment at school. So that public speaking, right? Your nerves, that's really, really common. About 21% of people struggle with that. Also speaking up in class or a meeting. So even just like something like raising your hand or sharing your opinions, or, you're in a group of people and you interrupt, things like that. Meeting new people, about 16% struggle with that. So, you're going to a new event in the crowd or a new class, new work, something like that. And then 14% is talking to someone in authority. So we have to talk to a boss, a teacher, maybe a neighbor or someone that has some type of authority over you. 13% struggle with just things like going to parties or large gatherings, groups of people, concerts. I think since the pandemic, we've been seeing a lot of that, right? Like a lot of social anxiety and avoidance and just overwhelming, like paralyzing fear going into situations just because of the unknown, the uncertainties of what can happen.
Right.
12% is expressing disagreement or differing opinions, right? So I think of that in like a meeting or something, speaking up and saying like, I don't feel that way, or, I think there's a different way to do that. Going kind of against that grain of the norm of what everyone else wants or it has in their mind can be really hard. And then 3 more would be entering into an occupied room or showing up somewhere late. About 11% struggle with that. So I think of, like there's a meeting at a certain time and you show up, a couple minutes late, but then everyone's staring at you.
Yeah.
So
I've been there, Lindsay. Yeah.
It's hard. Yeah. And then working while being watched, 11%, I think for kids too, teachers coming around, things like that. Or, you have, you're typing and someone's watching you, things like that. It's just feeling kind of like the eyes are on you. And then 8% is pretty common though. Eating, drinking, or writing while being watched. So that eating, I work with a lot of kids and adolescents who struggle sitting in front of others in the cafeteria and eating. There's just a lot of social pressure, I think, that can come from that and fear of, judgment of what other people might be thinking of you. So,
oh man, that makes a lot of sense for that one. Just even with kids, with the messiness of it. And I would imagine that some things develop during that time. Of maybe somebody making fun of someone because they got chocolate on their face, something like that. And that could maybe spiral a bit and then just keep feeling that more and more.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thanks for sharing all this, Lindsay.
Yeah, definitely. If anyone, wants to come see me, I'm definitely an expert in social anxiety and I love working with people, going out in the community and doing things too, like really just overcoming those fears and gaining confidence, like you said.
That's great. So if anybody wants to reach out to Lindsay, you can check us out at shoresidetherapies.com and we'll put her information right under the comments in Facebook and we'll see you soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Lori.
All right. Thanks. Bye.